Hi everyone, my name's Tom and I'm back talking about F1 Fantasy. We've kick-started the Canada Grand Prix weekend. So we've just had FP1, just had FP2, and breaking news alert, it has now just been officially confirmed that Charles Leclerc will be taking a 10-place grid penalty, at least a 10-place grid penalty, potentially more if they change other parts of his car, but it's definitely going to be at least a 10-place grid penalty, and potentially he might actually be starting at the back of the grid. So we could be, that's why straight away I've already got a team up, which is Ferrari-less, which may or may not be a good thing. But yeah, I'm just going to leave that team up for a moment whilst I introduce what I'm doing here, basically. For me, it's quite late at night. FP2's just happened. So, I'm downstairs in the living room, been kicked out of the bedroom. So here I am recording on my Friday night. Don't know how your Friday night's going, but so yeah, in this video I'm going to be talking about basically my final thoughts leading into the Grand Prix. Thinking about qualifying the race, who's looking good in the practice sessions. We're going to have a quick look, spoiler alert, quick look at the practice session times, got FP1 and FP2 here. Have a look at a couple of team builds which I'm considering, and like you can already see a team there already. And then we're going to throw over to Twitter towards the end of the video, where I'm going to be doing my best to answer your questions. So please make sure you are subscribed, turn on your notifications, all that stuff. You know how YouTube works by now, I'm sure. Because I do these videos every week, team selection, final thoughts videos, plus other various random stuff that I put out there in terms of F1 fantasy. So yeah, let's have a think about what's happened, what's going on, what are the big issues, who are the big drivers that we want to be picking this week, how badly we're going to be compromising our teams to wedge in all the value, and let's just have a little think about as much as I can. Hopefully I won't miss too much because there's a lot going on in my brain which I need to somehow get into this video. So let's get straight into it. First things first, let's just clear this up. Red Bull, best constructor for me this week. I just think there's basically no competition. We can have a look at the constructors there. You can see here they're on this double streak. For me personally, the Red Bulls have looked strong in. Let's have a quick look at the practice times. Verstappen top in both practice sessions. I know Perez did fine in P4 and FP1. He didn't do so great in FP2, which is a slight concern, and we have seen in the past Perez has actually struggled with even getting Q3. Like last year, he had a couple of races where he was just a bit off it, but I'm confident that Perez can still do absolutely fine this week. He's in like the strongest car in the grid at the moment. Red Bull looking reliable. I think Red Bull on the double streak just looks so strong. I think it's a no-brainer. So all the teams that I'm going to go through in this video will have Red Bull as constructor. So there you go. Let's get that out of the way. Second of all, Perez is also going to be in the team. I haven't just said, he finished, P11 in FP2, but I still think he's a fantastic option and arguably the best option as a turbo driver this week, given Leclerc's penalty, which I'm going to discuss in a minute. So I think Perez plus Red Bull are in my team, like for sure, this week, and potentially going forward over the next couple of races as well, unless suddenly both Red Bull engines blow up and we're all panicking about what's going on, but for the moment, I see no reason to not have Red Bull and Perez in my team, so that's what I'm sticking with. Basically, the rest of this video is going to be trying to work out who the other four drivers are going to be, who's optimal to get in that team. And obviously, if we had all the money in the world, you would just put Verstappen in there and build around him. But Verstappen does have some downside to put him in the team. You're probably going to end up with like double Haas or Haas and Latifi sort of build, and a bit iffy, but we'll have a look at it in a minute anyway. So before we go any further, let's have a quick chat about Leclerc. First of all, let's see how he did in the practice session. So P5, not exceptionally good, and then P2, fine. He was very, very close actually, within just about a tenth of a second from Verstappen. So very good in FP2. So, and I do think the Ferraris looking kind of fine in general. I mean, Carlos Sainz P2, P3. So the Ferrari itself is looking fine, but Leclerc has got a grid penalty. It's been confirmed just before I started recording this that Leclerc has got a grid penalty. He's going to be starting sort of best case scenario 11th place. There is the potential for him to be starting actually at the back of the grid. We've already seen Tsunoda is starting at the back of the grid because he's taken various engine components, which is just giving him a heap of penalties, so he's at the back of the grid. Leclerc could very well do the same. We don't know for sure yet as of the time of recording this, but at the very least, Leclerc, he's going to get a 10-place grid penalty. So if he gets it on pole, which I'm still not even convinced is going to happen this week, given how the practice sessions have gone so far, best case scenario is that Leclerc is going to start the race in 11th place. Now, the way the fantasy rules work this season, it's been changed from last season. Therefore, the points that you gain from gaining positions or losing positions. Effectively, Leclerc is going to start the race with -10 because you lose 2 points for every position lost. And this season, those points are worked out based on your qualifying position, not your starting grid position. So if Leclerc qualifies, for example, on pole, he gets put back in grid position 11, he's going to start off with -10. Whereas last year, the -10, the plus and minus points for gaining positions was based on the starting grid position, so it didn't take into account penalties. So actually last year, when your really good drivers were capable of ploughing through the field and overtaking loads of people, it's actually kind of beneficial to have your really good drivers start at the back. The race that sticks out in my mind was, for example, Verstappen, who I believe started at the back in Russia. Sorry, probably shouldn't be mentioning Russia at the moment. But whatever. He started at the back and he finished, I think, P2 in that race. So that was really good for him last season. But this season, the way the points work, it's going to be very detrimental. So Leclerc effectively starting with -10 points is really not where you want to be going, and especially not, a lot of people will be turbo driving Leclerc without realising he's got a penalty. So you guys, you probably already know if you're watching this, you've probably been, keeping up to date with what's going on. If not, this might be the first time you're hearing of it. Leclerc has a penalty, so be warned. He is not going to be in my team this week. I can tell you that much for sure. And that's kind of interesting of how the rest of the team's going to shape up now, because Leclerc's been in my team every single week so far this season. We had 8 races. We're into race week 9 already. Can't believe how fast time's flying. But for the first time this season, Leclerc is not going to be in my team. So, 19 million, he's obviously been producing fantastic value, but he's not going to be in the team. Therefore, we have that 19 million to kind of distribute amongst other things that we can upgrade some other people. And this is why I've immediately put it onto this team. And you can see this is costing me -10 points. So what I'd actually probably have to do is leave Kevin Magnuson in to make it free for me. So this is potentially a team I'm looking at, which is Ferrari-less. It does go without Sainz, and I think Sainz is actually going to be a very good pick this week. He's had a few DNS, we know. Ferrari reliability is massively under the spotlight at the moment, which also makes me kind of reluctant to put Magnuson in the team, but that's another story. I do think this team is pretty well balanced. We've seen Russell just constantly perform well throughout the season so far. I think the race pace in that Mercedes, even though constantly in FP1, again, let's have a quick look. Russell's P6, P7, so he's doing fairly okay. We've seen in the past Mercedes, when they don't know what they're doing, their setup, they do really well in practice and they drop it in qualifying, but then they come back in the race and they get those positions gained. Let's have a quick look at the spreadsheet. Excuse me, I've got too many tabs here because there's been so many races going on. If we scroll across, let's have a look at George Russell, just because I'm talking about him at the moment. Look how many points he's gained over here in the green. 46 points. If I scroll across, I'm never sure if my picture's blocking it because I can't actually see it on this screen. 46 points gained from, basically wherever Russell starts on the grid, he pretty much never falls back from there. He never loses points. Compare that to Leclerc right underneath him, a really clear comparison here. -36. That's a huge whopping difference right there. Just one example of how consistent Russell has been and how reliable that Mercedes car has actually proven. I know there's been a whole, everyone's joking around about how bad Mercedes are and their porpoising, blah, blah, blah. Car's unstable. Poor old Lewis Hamilton's got a crooked back and everything. It's everyone's just piling on the pressure, maybe making fun out of Mercedes because Mercedes has been on top for so long, and everyone's just like, haha, Mercedes suck. But actually, Mercedes is the third best team on the grid, and I know Russell's expensive, but without Leclerc in our teams this week, it does open up that door to get Russell into our team, particularly because if we go back this way, we can see over here Russell is almost on a double streak. So Silverstone is up next, his home race. I was at Silverstone last year, great weekend, and I remember seeing George Russell qualifying in that Williams, and I can't remember exactly who he finished. I think he put it in P12, P13 off the complete top of my head. That might be wrong, but he did really well in Silverstone. He's potentially on that double streak. If he qualifies in top 10 in Canada, finishes the race in top 10 in Canada, which, as long as there's no accidents or whatever, is going to happen. So, having George in your team this week kind of sets you up for next week, because I think he's going to be very popular. Think back to Miami. I think a lot of people brought George Russell into Miami because he was on that double streak and it paid off well, and George is just consistently paying off well, and I've not had him in my team all season so far, but with no Leclerc, this could be the week to bring him in. And like I said, this build does look pretty nice. Fernando Alonso, let's have a quick chat about him. I've had him in my team earlier on in the season and it was like a disaster. You know, he keeps promising really well, but you know, you can't argue. Let's go back to the FP1, FP2. FP1 he was third, and then again fifth. That's remarkable consistency. We have seen him show this much promise before. FP3 sort of drops down to like P10. Watch out for that tomorrow if he suddenly drops, because then he suddenly doesn't seem to qualify particularly well going into actual quali. So Alpines are like a bit of an enigma. Sometimes they do really well in practice, suck at qualifying, good race pace. Sometimes they're not good in practice, not good in qualifying, but suddenly they do have a good race pace. They're a little bit like all over the place. Alonso doesn't have the best record in Canada, but he's definitely very, very tempting. Once again, I've been hurt by Alonso several times this season, which makes me reluctant to kind of put him in. And actually, my team at the moment actually has Ocon in my team. I picked Ocon for Baku, just went for that sort of more reliable consistency across the season so far pick. But Alonso is just screaming that he's the one to pick out of the Alpines at the moment. You can see out Ocon, where is he? P15 in FP1, P10. So, the Alpine there, not looking great. Not looking great. Where is it? Not looking great at all. But Alonso's just making it look like, Alonso's, I'm back in the Ferrari. It's like Alonso's just crying out to be picked. I am, like I say, because of past traumas, a bit reluctant to pick him. But we can't base our picks this weekend because it was rubbish the other time. Like, we need to be a bit more objectively, mindful about what we're putting into our teams, and I do think Alonso is definitely a very reasonable pick. Moving on to the other random person who's never appeared in my team so far this season is Sebastian Vettel, who's on really good form, and ever since Aston Martin turned into a green Red Bull, like Aston Martin looking fantastic. I think let's have a quick look at what happened in the last couple of races. We see Baku. Let's scroll across the actual race result, which is where the main bulk of points come from. You can see Sebastian Vettel on P6. Picking up 25 points. I can speak, I promise. If you're paying around 11-12 million for someone and they score 25 points, you should be absolutely happy. That's exactly what you want from a 11-12 million, your Ocons, your Alonsos, your Vettels now, as we're looking at him. Even your Bottas, who's slightly cheaper than that, but, Bottas is a whole nother topic, which I guess I'm going to talk about. I'm going to be talking all day because there's so much to talk about. It's like fantasy's been blown wide open and there's so much choice without, with the Ferrari struggling, and all of a sudden, like, there's a lot to talk about, which is fantastic as, midnight approaches where I am. So yeah, Vettel looking fantastic. We go back a bit to Monaco again. Let's have a quick scroll across. We see Vettel, squeaking into the top 10 there. So ever since those upgrades from Spain, in fact, what happened in Spain? I can't actually remember. Where did Vettel come? Was it a good race of Vettel? Yeah, he was in P11. So after a very rocky start for Aston Martin, so these upgrades came in Spain. They've been working on them for the last couple of races. We've seen constant improvement from P11 to P10 to P6 last week. Are we going to see more of that in Canada? So we look at Vettel in FP1, and there he is, P9. We look at him in FP2, there he is, P4. He's showing some really good promise in the practice sessions and making it very tempting. Lance Stroll, I know it's his home race and everything, but Stroll has been generally struggling most of the season, I would argue, but particularly the last couple of races. Don't know what on earth was happening in Baku. He just randomly crashing into the wall a couple of times in the qualifying session. Don't know what's going on. But Stroll's struggling. Vettel seems to be finding the form of his life. He's doing all this stuff off track, which is fantastic for, all the wonderful things he's doing for the environment and equal rights, all this stuff, which is great. But, everyone's thinking he's distracted and he's going to retire. All he wants to do is become a politician. But actually, he's a bloody good race driver, okay? He's a world champion, multiple world champion. And is he back? I don't know. But he's certainly looking good. So, yeah, Vettel is definitely potentially a good shout for our teams as well. Magnuson, again, like I said, for me personally, is kind of filler. The hazards didn't look fantastic, let's admit it. P20 in FP1 and P14, just not exciting. There's reliability issues, so I'm not excited by Magnuson, and he's had a poor run of form in the last 3-4 races. But there's still potential. I still think Magnuson's not going to keep DNF in every single race. He's not going to consistently have bad races. He's going to spike a race every now and again where he'll just randomly do well and maybe come P8, P9, P10 maybe. Who knows? So I think at 6.1 million, if you can build your team, the rest of the team, and you're happy with the rest of your team, and all you can do is put Magnuson in, then it's fine. I wouldn't pick Magnuson because I think he's a particularly good option, but he's fine as filler. Because let's just quickly again refer back to the spreadsheet. Let me just scroll all the way back across here, and we'll have a look at the points. Like the main bulk of points you can see in this section here, like points per race. Look how chunky it is up the top. The F1 Fantasy is massively top end heavy. Not all the points, but the vast majority of your fantasy points are going to come from your big top drivers like the Red Bulls, like Perez, like potentially Russell, normally Leclerc, but perhaps not this week for me anyway. And then the one or two spots that you have left are kind of filler, and there we go. I feel like I've talked about this particular team for like way too long, so we'll have a look at another build. And boom, there we go. Magic of editing. Rather than see me randomly click around and stuff, I thought I'd just jump straight to it. This is another option because the Red Bulls, like I've already said, are looking very strong. Ferrari a bit iffy. Leclerc kind of out the picture at the moment. Max Verstappen, again, I refer back to, scroll all across the calendar, P1. If we go to the predicting quali thing, scroll across to see how consistent Max Verstappen's been across this season, 0.9. So he's always, well, I say always, on average, always, whatever. He's on average within one position of where he's predicted based on the qualifying, based on the practice sessions. So if we take that into account, he's currently P1. That means he should almost certainly be qualifying on pole or at the very worst case scenario P2. So Max Verstappen is arguably a very good shout because if you qualify in pole and go on to win the race, you're looking at around the 50 point mark, and when you consider 200 points for your team is what I'd argue is kind of that rough target you want to aim for. One of your drivers getting 50 points is 25%. It's a quarter of your kind of points target just in one driver. So 1 out of 6 slots in your team and one driver's getting that many points. I think if you can safely predict who's going to win the race and get them in your team, then I think this is arguably a very good build. I am also very tempted by this build. It does, like I say, compromise your team though, because look who I've got down the bottom here. Again, I've spoken about Magnuson, fine as filler, but then having a second filler option with Latifi, you could argue Schumacher, if you've got the budget, you could stretch to Albon, which would be fantastic, but I'm definitely short. As you can see, Albon here, I'm 0.6 short. So my budget's been taking a bit of a whack recently because of what's happening with Red Bull and Perez. Even though they're doing fantastic, their price has dropped. So I'm kind of left with a bit of a rubbish budget. But anyone who's got more than me, if you're looking in the 106.5 sort of region, then you can afford this team, and I think this team is absolutely fine. Like I say, personally would be going for Latifi if I went for this build, because I think Latifi's fine. He's been scoring quite well recently, and I know it's kind of embarrassing putting Latifi in my team. When you think of F1 Fantasy, you put the best drivers in, and that's it. But actually, you don't just put the best drivers in, you put the best all-round team that's going to score the most amount of points. And I think Latifi could be fine, bit of filler. He generally finishes the races. He had a couple of crashes at the start of the season, but he generally finishes the races because, there's not really anyone, he's not really raced anyone because he's generally at the back. Anyone that DNFs automatically promotes him further up the field. The Williams has looked pretty reliable so far this season, so I think Latifi is kind of a fine bit of filler. So this is another option for me. Vettel, again, if you've got the budget and you don't mind Latifi, you could argue that Vettel, again, I don't have enough money for this, but you could change Vettel into Alonso. I'm only 0.2 short of this. So again, if I really wanted to, I guess I could get both the Has boys in and have a team that looks like this, with Alonso looking on fine form, and then go all in with the Red Bull boys, which, is definitely an option, something I'm considering, but I haven't made my mind up yet. So, and here we are again with one more build I'm going to show you, which does actually include a Ferrari driver, Carlos Sainz, who I think is, like I said a little bit earlier, I think he is a good option this week. He's very likely, barring DNFs, some random craziness happening, which we cannot rule out because this is F1 and crazy stuff happens. But I do think Sainz is a good bet because he's very likely to beat his teammate, who's going to be potentially starting at the back of the grid. So he's probably going to get those points for beating his teammate in the race. So that's like an extra 3 nice little bonus points. He should, with the strength of the car, as long as he can finish the race with the reliability issues they're having, he should be finishing on the podium. So I do think Carlos Sainz is definitely a good option, and he's still really great value at 17.2 million. If he finishes the race, he should be on the podium ideally. And I think, if you can get a nice all-round team like this, which is another team I'm considering, this is a really strong team, and I really do actually like the look of this. It does avoid the likes of Latifi, it avoids the likes of Magnuson. So I'm definitely very tempted by a team like this. I think Sainz is a good pick. Alonso, I've already spoken about, good pick. Vettel, good pick. The one person I haven't spoken about in this team is Gasly, and Gasly had a fantastic race in Baku last week, and I think he's looking strong again. The AlphaTauri is definitely looking better in the last few races. Let's see where he is here. P11 into P6. Now Gasly is another one similar to Lando Norris, where he finishes in like the practice sort of stand-ins, he does generally carry that into qualifying. I've said this before about Norris. I think it's because of the level of driver they are. I do rate both Gasly and Norris extremely highly, and I think they carry, they maximise the car every single time they go out on track. And I'm not saying other drivers don't do that necessarily, but I think that could be a factor, but in why they do that. But basically, what I'm trying to say is Gasly's pretty consistent going from practice to qualifying to race pace. We saw it last year a lot last year when Gasly was just having his own little private race in P4, P5. If we can get that this week in Canada, absolutely brilliant. Tsunoda has already been confirmed as starting at the back of the grid because of his engine penalties. That's confirmed. So Gasly should arguably out-qualify him, and he'll almost certainly, barring any, again, DNFs or whatever, he should be out racing his teammate. In fact, it would be a complete disaster. I think it would literally have to be a DNF, basically, for Gasly not to get those extra points for beating Tsunoda, because of where Tsunoda's definitely starting. You could also argue that Tsunoda is more likely to get his car set up specifically for the race and just completely forget about qualifying and get his car completely set up for the race. Make it a strong race car, but because he knows he's starting at the back of the grid anyway. So Gasly should be getting the points for out-qualifying, and he should be far enough ahead that Tsunoda's not going to get near him, basically. So I think Gasly is a fantastic shout. He's in a bit of good form. The AlphaTauri is looking strong, and for reasons I've just said about his teammate, should get those extra few points. So I do really like this team. I think this team is very balanced. Doesn't go quite all in like the team I just had a minute ago, Verstappen, Perez, Red Bull. You're really, really all in. And we saw what happened if you go all in last week with the Ferraris. If you went all in with the Ferraris, you're probably still like having nightmares about it, to be honest, because it hurt. Like if you had a Ferrari constructor, I mean, I personally had Leclerc and Sainz as individual drivers, but had Red Bull as constructor, so I wasn't hurt too badly by it. But this week, are we going to learn from the lesson and not go all in? Yes, we're looking to maximise the points, but it's also playing that risk out, balancing act basically. How high risk is it for the reward? So if you're like me and you kind of lean more towards sort of consistency and a little bit more safety and reliability rather than trying to spike points every week, I really, really like this team. Okay, here we are with Twitter. It is now 2 minutes to midnight as I continue to record into the night and realise that this video is probably going to be way longer than normal just because, I don't know, but I think it's just literally so much to talk about. There's so much going on, there's so much to compute. And here we are with Twitter. I'm going to try and fly through these as quickly as I can because, I've already discussed kind of my general feelings about it, but if you're interested in me answering your questions, follow me on Twitter. There I am down there in the bottom left, PopBandMan F1. Type me into Twitter, follow me, and give me some questions. I am considering doing these as their own separate video in the future, so that's some potential. So let's go through the Twitter questions right now because I kind of need to get to bed at some point. So, like I said, these questions might be slightly outdated because I put these up a few days ago. So, this one, for example, straight off the bat, Perez or Leclerc turbo driver. Get out of here with Leclerc. He's not in my team anymore. Perez, easy turbo driver for me. Also, he's asked, second question here, is subbing Magnuson worth the -10? So what have you done? I will need 3 subs to get the constructor change to Red Bull and to sub Verstappen and Magnuson. Michael Schumacher. No, I don't think so. Like I've already stated earlier, I do think Magnuson is at some point going to have a decent race. I don't think he's going to constantly DNF. I know there's reliability issues and I don't know, but I don't think Magnuson's going to consistently get -5 points. Famous last words. But I think Magnuson, for a -10, I don't think it's right. Magnuson could easily score 10 to 20 points in a race, and taking a -10 for whoever you're trying to bring in instead of him, not convinced it's worth it, but there you go. Moving on. Which teams will the Montreal circuit favour, do you think? I think you kind of answered your own question a little bit here. Red Bull, Alpine. As we've seen in the practice session, Red Bull and Alpine, particularly in the hands of Alonso, are looking very, very strong. There are quite a lot of straights in Canada. The way I think of Canada, it's almost like a mini Monza, where there's just like straight into chicane, and then there's like little hairpin and whatever. I really like Canada as a track. I think it's fantastic. I think it's a fantastic track. I really, really enjoy it, and I enjoy watching it. And with those long straights, the Alpine and Red Bulls are arguably the fastest in the straight at the moment, and for sure we've seen that in practice sessions. So yes, to answer your question, I do think Red Bull are strong. I do think Alpine are strong, and I think we need definitely some sort of coverage between both those teams, I would argue. Same question here. Which team is the Canada GP suited? I would say Red Bull and Alpine. Well, there you go. We've got another person backing up exactly what we've sort of, people are sort of answering their own questions here. I agree with you is my answer. Red Bull and Alpine definitely looking good. Should Ferrari take the penalty of the turbo? Again, don't need to answer that because they have. No top three from other teams except Red Bull, Ferrari and Mercedes. Could this be the race for it? Absolutely. And no top three from other teams except Red Bull. I'm pretty sure Lando's had a podium actually, hasn't he? I believe. Am I going crazy? I think Lando has had a podium, so I think that might not be entirely correct, but could this be the race for someone else outside? For sure, absolutely for sure. I think there's definitely potential for someone, potentially Fernando Alonso. He's there lurking in the background like, pick me. I do think someone like Alonso or a Vettel, they could be in for a shout for podium. If we expect a little bit of craziness in a race, it's kind of like Canada's not the safest of circuits. Some of the walls are quite close in, easy for accidents to happen. That final chicane is very easy to just shoot over the bumps and straight into the wall. We're going to see some accidents, I anticipate. Could it be some safety cars screwing people over, safety cars favouring other people? For sure, I do think we could potentially see some different faces on the podium this weekend. Do you think it might be worth going Alpine as your constructor? No, I don't. I honestly think that the main bulk of points is going to come with the big heavy hitters like Red Bull, Ferrari, potentially Mercedes, but I don't think so. I think basically it's between Ferrari and Red Bull for me. Alpine, enables you to pack in loads of really good, expensive drivers into your team, but I just think the constructor is probably the most valuable part of the 6 slots that you have in your team, and nailing the constructor is the best way to climb the rank, in my opinion. What's the best way to gain value in your team? Who knows this season, honestly, what's going on with the price changes. I don't know, to be honest. I would have a few weeks ago I would have said just pick good drivers and your team will naturally go up in value, and that happened last year quite easily. But with the hacker man, with his botted teams, who knows what's going on this year. I would argue like you could potentially sacrifice optimizing your team by making early substitutions. So rather than waiting like I tend to do until after FP3 to make my substitutions, look at who's going up in price, look who's dropping, and try and play the market and make a couple of early substitutions, but bearing in mind the race ahead. So think about who you might want in that race, and then if they happen to be look like they're going up in price, pick them up, and then your team value will naturally grow. A few more questions to get through here, and then I can finally render this, upload it, and eventually get to bed. Which Alpine driver do you think we should bet? Well, Ocon has been the most consistent so far this season, but Alonso, once again, Alonso's really come into a bit of form the last couple of races, really doing well. Alonso's on fire in their practice session, so for sure Alonso. I've already kind of explained what goes on the Leclerc grid penalty. It's not good news. That's all you need to know. Do you think it's good? Yes. I'll discuss this more in the next week or two, but Austria is very much around the corner. It's only a couple of races away. It's a sprint race. There's the potential for Checo to be on that race streak. So 100% wait for Austria, I would argue. I am personally going to go with Austria almost certainly as my mega driver. So if you still get your mega driver in your back pocket, I would argue Austria would definitely be a good bet. And then the last question. If my team, well, this again is a bit of an outdated question because you're including Leclerc, and I'm not convinced Leclerc should be in our teams this season. This race. Thoughts on who to turbo drive? Again, I think Perez is just kind of a safe bet. Going all in Red Bull. Yeah, you're kind of reading my mind what I was discussing earlier. Going all in Red Bull seems a little bit risky. So, yeah, I would definitely argue no Leclerc for the turbo driver. I think Perez is just kind of a safe bet. He's likely to finish on the podium, like I said about Sainz earlier. He's on good form. I know he didn't do great in FP2. Let's see how he does in FP3 and if there are any issues, that sort of thing. And that pretty much answers all the questions for this week. So, yeah, like I say, make sure you follow me on Twitter. Make sure you're subscribed and all that stuff. Thank you for joining me on yet another little mini adventure. We're going into Canada. and I'll be back at some point in the next couple of weeks looking ahead to Silverstone. Thanks very much for watching, guys. Best of luck. Let me know who you're picking, either on Twitter or on the YouTube comments, wherever you want to post it. And yeah, very good luck to you, and enjoy your weekend, and catch you soon for another video. Thank you very much, and bye.